I absolutely love fishing for commercial skimmers, particularly in the cooler months when they form a really important target, not just for match anglers, but also for pleasure anglers to keep bites coming. Now, you can't think about commercial skimmers without thinking about pellets. They are the staple diet of these fish, and when you're catching those really big bags, they're always the bait that's given me the most success. I've come today to Partridge Lakes fishery on a lake called Holbar, which is absolutely stuffed full of skimmers, hopefully to show you exactly how to get the best out of the bait for catching these fish. Okay, let's talk about how we prepare pellets for fishing on the pole for skimmers in particular. The most important thing is that these pellets are soft all the way through, and to do that you need to prepare them ideally the night before. I've done my pellets for today's session last night, last thing at night. I'm not talking about doing them halfway through the day. Last thing at night. It's very cold, particularly now in the winter. In the summer, you could probably get away with it first thing in the morning, but you need at least a minimum of 2 hours for these pellets to soak up what I'm about to show you now, okay? When it comes to pellets, I like a mix. I like 2 and 4 mils, so I've got Fin Perfect ones with me today. A real basic pellet that works brilliantly. Fish love to eat them, so that's dead easy choice for me. But I do like to have a mix. I don't just like to have one type of pellet. If you remember, I am going to be fishing light expanders and that on the hook today. So, for example, a 4 mil expander or even a 6 mil expander could be my hook bait. So I don't see the point in just having the 2 mils. So I like to have a bit of a mix of the two. I've got a couple of open bags here. So what I do is I pour in mostly the 2 mil pellets. All right, so get them in just into a big bucket, and that's really important. You don't want like a bait tub or something like that. You need something with a big surface area, big bowl with a surface area. I'm just going to pat those thinly in the bottom of the bowl, and then nowhere near as many fours. So I'll show you the sort of quantity. It's almost like sort of a sprinkling of fours in between. So if I hold them up, all right, you can see there it's mainly 2s with an odd 4 mil in, and that's basically just to keep the fish guessing all the time. I also think that if there's a lot of roach in that in, having an odd 4 mil definitely like holds a bigger fish or two. And then all I'm going to do is I'm basically going to just cover these pellets with water. So I've got a bait tub full of water here. I have to keep the bucket flat, okay? So I'm going to pour this water in, and then I'll show you. We'll get the camera to come in and show you exactly the amount of water that I'm talking about. So if I just pour the water in, and I'm just looking to just cover the pellets. I want every single pellet to be covered. It doesn't matter if you're slightly too generous with the water, because we're not going to be putting these around a method or anything like that. So now every pellet has just about covered. You can see like odd little heads of pellets poking out of the water. That for me is the perfect amount. So I pat it all down nice and flat, and I'll show you now exactly how they come out in the morning. So these are how the pellets have now come out. These are the pellets that I did last night. And you can see here, it's just a solid block of pellets, okay? So every pellet, all the pellets have absorbed the water. They're now really, really soft, but actually still in their full pellet form. And this is how I love to fish pellets when I'm tapping them in on the pole, particularly for skimmers. Also works for F1s and roach and things like that, but particularly for skimmers, this is how I love to do it. These would be too wet. And like I talked about before, you know, if you wouldn't use this much water for a method or something like that, but for the pole, it's perfect. So all I'm going to do now is literally get my hand in here and look, just break it up. I'm just going to break these pellets up. And that just, every pellet, so I take one of the 4mm that I talked about. If you see here, if I just squeeze this 4mm pellet, all right, I'm going to squeeze it dead slowly. You can see that that pellet is just complete mush. All right, it's soft all the way through, but it was still in its perfect form. All right, look, they're in their perfect form, and that's really important. I want the fish to feed on the pellets because that's what I'm going to have to use on the hook. All right, and because I'm using those on the hook, I'm going to make sure that all these pellets are lovely and soft, just like the hook bait, and that is now what they are. So they are absolutely and utterly perfect. So as well as having the perfect pellets to feed, you also need the perfect pellets on the hook. And for me, the perfect pellets are the Pro Expanders. These have been an absolute game changer when it comes to expander pellets, okay? Because they're so easy to prepare and you get the perfect pellet every time. So I'm going to show you how I do it. There's probably loads of different ways to do it, but mine are in this little tub here, okay? So this is, I've done these last night. I'm going to do a new batch. I'm going to literally, when I get on the bank, I open up this little tub, plonk them in a bait tub like that. They will be ready to go and perfect all day. And I'll show you how I do them. So I basically got myself a little clip lock tub, and I'm a massive fan of having different sizes of pellets. You've got to remember, well, you know, when you're fishing any other baits, let's take maggots for example. It's nice to have some pinkies. It's nice to maybe have a caster. You know, when you're picking out a grain of corn, or maybe when you're talking about pellets, actual hard pellets, we have 8mm, 4mm, 6mm. It's important to have different sizes of expanders because you never know on a day what's going to work. So I always bring with me some 2s, 4s and 6s. In the summer that might be 4, 6s and 8s, but 2, 4s and 6s. So literally a few 2s in the bottom. I mean, 2s are so small, there's enough there for about 10 matches. Few 4s, same again, you know, just in case 4 is the main bait really. I try to do like a couple of 100 in the pot, and then a few 6s. Now, as we all know, it's easy to ruin expanders, but with Pro Expanders you don't have to worry about it. So what would you say that is? Half full, I would say, about half full in my little tub. And now I'm just going to pour the water in and make sure these are well covered, all right, at least half again with the water there. Can you see? And then all I do is put the lid on and pop them in the fridge overnight. And in the morning, these will be the perfect expanders. They do take a little bit of time to get perfect, okay? At least 2 or 3 hours. So I always do them the night before. The amazing thing is as well, with the stuff that we've made to make these expanders, these will actually last like 3 or 4 days without going off. It's unbelievable. They don't overly burst and go. And I'll show you what they come out like. So these are the ones I've done last night, a mix of 4s, 6s and 8s. Every single one is perfect every time. You know, we're going to talk about hook baits today and how we use them and why we use different sizes, but having the perfect hook bait is really important. Right, we've settled on our peg, and today I'm going to be using the pole to target this pellet-based approach. Now, one of the things that I find really important when it comes to skimmers, particularly in the cooler months, is you need to give yourself a little bit of distance between yourself and where you're going to fish. Don't know why, there is days when you can catch close in, but generally speaking I find the fish have pushed out a little bit in winter time and they just seem to settle that little bit nicely. So I've had a little bit of a plumb around and I've picked 2 spots where I'm going to fish today, and we'll look at the rigs a little bit later. But first of all I want to talk about how I'm going to kick these pegs off and how I'm going to target each swim. So first of all, I've got the pellets that I prepared earlier, and I'm going to have one swim purely with pellets, okay? This is the part of the swim where I'm going to target the biggest fish. I'm hoping to catch skimmers mainly on this line. Maybe some roach or an F1 or a carp as well, but mainly skimmers. That's my target. That's because I know there's a lot of skimmers in this lake. and I'm going to go with this bait. And it means that I'm not going to get bitted out by anything. I'm not going to have to worry about shipping little small fish back. So pellets are the main target. When you go F1 fishing or when you go carp fishing in winter, there's a school of thought that says you need to feed next to nothing. So you can see there in my hand, there's like 20 odd micros there. I'm sure some F1 anglers will go, whoa, whoa, you've overfed it, all right? Skimmers are completely different. They're a different type of fish, and when you're using this sort of bait to target these fish, I'm not expecting one or two to come in. I'm expecting sort of shoals of fish to arrive. You know, I'm not expecting just to catch an odd one throughout the day. I am looking at it as when they turn up, they're going to turn up and feed, even in the cold weather. So I'm not going to be taking it dead steady with pellets because I'm targeting those sorts of fish. So I'm actually going to kick the swim off today, and I'm going to make a small ball to kick this peg off. So something like that, which, I mean, that is probably enough pellets to tap in for F1s for at least an entire session. But I'm looking to put that bed of bait down on the bottom to give the skimmers something to come over. You've got to remember there's a lot of roach in this lake as well, so they'll probably eat the pellets as well. So that will kick off one of my lines. And then I'll probably mix it up how I top it up. Sometimes I use my small pot, so my small little cad pot. I might put sometimes a full cad pot, sometimes a little piece. Maybe I'll even put a very small ball in as a top up every now and again when I come off it, something like this size, back in the big pot. I'm going to be relatively aggressive. You can see here I've got a nice tub. I've got a couple of pints of pellets with me today. If it's going to work on that particular line, I want to be a little bit more forceful. You obviously could tap a few pellets in and take it steady, but I don't want to do that today. I know there's a lot of fish in this venue. Now, over that line, I'm going to use expanders as a hook bait. It's purely the pellet-based line, and we'll look at how I fish those on that line in a minute. The other line is really interesting, and it's a way that I've been using pellets to great effect. You've got to remember that a lot of the ground baits that we fish are also crushed pellet based. So today I'm going to actually treat the other line as if it's a bit of a ground bait line, if you like. So I'm going to incorporate some maggots as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed that decent ball at the start like it's ground bait. Okay, so a decent amount of pellets at the start. That's going to be almost like my ground bait, but with that I'm going to put probably like 50 or so maggots as well, so I can go on this line with maggots and target maybe some roach to keep me busy in between my skimmer line. And I probably won't top that up with pellets at all throughout the day. I'll just use that one feed of pellets as like a ground bait alternative. And it's something that I do a lot, and I found it really effective for holding big fish in my peg. And you know, and then I'll top it up with a few maggots as the day goes on. So I'm not really going to concentrate too much on that line for you guys today. I want to show you more about the pellet fishing approach. But you can see there, I've given myself two lines using the pellets, which is the key to the day, how to use pellets to catch these commercial silverfish and in particular skimmers. So that's how I'm going to go about approaching those two lines. Let's have a little look at the rigs I'm going to use. Having done quite a bit of pellet fishing for sort of F1s and carp, you might know there's a sort of a style to a pellet rig that's slightly different from your more sort of traditional maggot fishing, silver fishing type setup. So I tried to incorporate a bit of both into my pellet fishing skimmer setup. There's some things that I can take from what I've learned pellet fishing for, say, bigger fish, and actually bring that in and combine that with a balanced approach. So first of all, I'm just going to start with the elastic at the top. Got a 5 Dura slip in here, very, very soft elastic. If I'm fishing on venues that are sort of over about 5 foot deep, this is the elastic that I'm looking to use, maybe a 5, maybe even a 7 if the fish are big enough. If it's shallower than this, I would be dropping lighter to say 3s, 5s, normal slip, original slip elastic, which is a lot softer than these elastics. These are still very, very soft, but not as maybe beefed up as you might do for, say, F1s and carp. So there's a lovely balance there. The float is an F1 pellet. So one of the key features when you're fishing pellets is you're fishing like in a very stable manner with a lot of your shot down the bottom of the rig, probably a short hook length, which we'll look at in a minute. And these floats are like specifically designed for that style of fishing, so I don't see why I wouldn't use it for my pellet fishing for silvers. I've gone on the light side. I always go as light as I possibly can get away with in the depth. Got about 6 foot today, and that's a 4x12 F1 pellet. There is a slight breeze. I've also set up a 4x14 just in case the wind gets up and I couldn't handle it. You'll see here I've got a short length of line between the pole tip and float. Not sort of ridiculously 3 or 4 inches. I've got about 10 inches or so. I need to be banging control of that rig at all times, and that's why this is important. It's got a nice visual bristle on here as well, but it'll be dotted right down. It'll be absolute pimple on the surface. I will be striking at any indications. I'm not going to be waiting for bites to develop like I would do with, say, maggots and worms. I'm going to be striking at bites. One of the important things about this float is it's all nice and stable and sensitive like that, and that night-eye wire gives that the option as well. You can see it's very, very durable, but it's made out of wire, so it keeps the float nicely balanced. There's 014 AccuPower mainline, and then effectively my shotting pattern is one that I've used for skimmers with pellets and corn and stuff like that for as long as I can remember now, you know, well over 10 years. Literally just the shot that's right for the float. These are number 10s. You might use number 9s on another float if it's a bit bigger. Might even use less on a slightly smaller float, and they're just roughly 1 inch apart. There's no science behind it. I've used Stots because I always like Stots for this sort of thing. They move about on the line without damaging the line easily, so that's fine. And I've just put number 10s there on top of a 4-inch hook length. So I've got a 4-inch hook length of 010 AccuPower to a 16 SFL hook. A very, very nice setup, not a long hook length. Now, the way this differs to if I was fishing for, say, F1s and that, is I do like to lay a little bit of line on the bottom. I'm a big believer that skimmers and bream, they suck your bait in a different way to sort of F1s and that. And I do like to have a really stable bait. I don't want any line moving above that hook bait. I want it completely fixed on the bottom. So when the fish picks it up and sucks it in with confidence, not a tight line. So I've got about, I'd say, 2 inches on the bottom there. So by the time I get fishing, there's going to be about 1.5 inches with a little bit of slack taken out of the line, something like that. And it's a lovely balanced rig. And on this, I can put 2mm, 4mm pellets, no problem. And if I do think I need to fish with a 6mm pellet, I'd probably up my hook size to a size 14. I'm not expecting it to be massively prolific today, but this allows me to go out there at the start and see what there is in the peg. So I've potted in that initial feed that we talked about. I've let the peg settle for probably about 20 minutes or so now. Had a cup of tea, talked to you guys through the rig that I'm going to be using. I have also fed that line off to the other side just with a few maggots and that ball of pellets as an option. I'm not really going to stress too much about that today, but it just was another way of showing you that pellet feed. I'm going to go out on these pellets because pellets can be an instant bait. Fish can get on it straight away. So I think I'm going to start on a single 4mm. I think if I had to pick a size to start with, it'd probably be a single 4mm. I'm going to try all sorts of different things during the day today. In particular, I've had a lot of success on 2mm pellets, and we'll look at that a little bit later. Let's get out there and see if we can get a bite. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about presentation when it comes to pellets on the pole for skimmers and how that might differ from, say, F1s and carp. I think there's a tendency for F1s and carp and anglers who love to fish for them to be very active and proactive with their bait. So they might be doing things like this, lifting and dropping the rig and trying to almost entice a bite. Now, that does work for fish like skimmers and bream. There is a time when that sort of thing can work nicely. However, I tend to find that tends to be more with the smaller skimmers. Whereas when you've got bream in particular, or those skimmers that are, say, a pound or more, what we'd sort of consider bigger fish, it does seem to be the case a lot of the time that just being patient with the bait nailed on the bottom can be good. And you can actually cost yourself fish by working and dropping your rig. So even though I am a big fan of sort of lifting that rig, say, you know, like this, like a foot out of the water, putting it in a fish's eye line and dropping it back into the peg nice and slowly, I am a fan of that, but sometimes I do feel it can actually be a little bit detrimental. So I will often go through periods of time, say 10 minutes, 15 minutes, when I think every time I put my rig in, I'm literally just going to nail it on the bottom in the spot and wait for that bream or bigger skimmer or something like that to come and identify my hook bait, rather than sort of searching out a fish, because that can result in possibly smaller fish and fish that we don't want almost disrupting the peg. I also think that movement within the, movement of the pole and any movement of your rig up and down through the water column can sometimes put fish off. So just by having your bait absolutely nailed like that and waiting for that true bite, you might find that you end up putting more skimmers in the net. So just mix that up, mix that presentation up. Don't be tempted just to leave it all the time. I'm very open-minded. I'm very aware that lifting and dropping could be the best way today, but just want you to bear that in mind when you're out fishing with pellets. It's not all about lifting and dropping the rig like this all the time. Often it can be about that little bit of patience and waiting for that bigger fish. So I mentioned earlier on how to prepare the expander pellets for the hook. I want to touch on why I've got these different sizes and when I might use them. So today, there's a lot of silverfish in this lake. There's a lot of roach in this lake. It's very, very cold today, and the roach are having a chew, but not as prolifically as they may do on another day. So I can actually get away with some nice small hook bait. So a 4mm was my starting bait. I even dropped down to a 2mm, a single 2mm, but I did catch 3 or 4 nice roach on that, which they were nice and good fish to catch. And if I'd have wanted to keep going with those, I could have done, but I did feel that the skimmers were there, or the skimmers could be there. So I've actually put a 6mm on for a bit, and I caught a nice 2.5 pound size skimmer. That was on the 6mm hook bait. So I do feel I need to mix it up. Now, when you go and there's a lot of skimmers, often they need that bigger hook bait to pick out a bait. So I would say if it's very prolific, look for 6mm. If you're being that little bit more patient, look for a 4mm. And maybe if you want to try and catch everything, go for the 2mm. One other bait I really would strongly suggest is a double 2mm pellet. Now, the 2.2mm seem to just fool those craftier fish, those fish that have seen it before, those fish that aren't really picking out individual baits. They're maybe just sucking in several micro pellets at a time. That double 2mm can be really good, and a very good option on hard fish waters, maybe if the water's a little bit clearer. So by having that little selection of expanders in there, every time I go fishing, I've always got the choice to try and find the edge when it comes to my hook bait. Well, I've been having a lovely day's fishing today, but I want to touch on when pellets are at their most effective, because today's been a classic example of how they can be good at times and how other times you have to try and mix things up a little bit. I've probably caught half a dozen nice skimmers on this line to the right that's pellets only. I've caught a few roach on it as well, which is quite interesting, but I've kept having to drop on with my maggots over that ball of pellets, and I've actually managed to keep a few more roach coming over that line to keep me sort of entertained. But we are in the absolute dead of winter at the moment. It's bitterly cold today, and from my experience I tend to find that pellets work better as you're coming out of winter. I would say like end of February, coming into March time. Fantastic time of year to look for pellets for catching those silverfish bags. Likewise, just before it drops into winter. Pellets are a lovely way of catching those bonus fish in the depths of winter, but you have to use them sort of as a secret weapon almost, just to try and nick a few fish, and then they start to come into their own that little bit later on in the year. Hopefully this guide today has shown you exactly how to use pellets to get the best from them with fish like skimmers and roach, because I've had a lovely day's fishing today, and I know by following this advice you can too.